we start. I think we have already read it once, so I'll read each sentence and then you tell me whether it's clear and we'll go ahead. So, but at the same time, the integral knowledge gives us the awareness of that infinite existence as the conscious force which creates and governs the worlds and manifests itself in their works. It reveals the self-existent in his universal conscious will as a Lord Ishvara. Okay, so what he's saying is that if you are doing the integral yoga, you will have to go right up to the Purushottama or the Ishvara consciousness, up to the supermind, and there you will find that the divine is impersonal as well as personal. Okay, because when he says divine conscious will, no, here it is. Self-existent in universal consciousness is a Lord. When he talks of the Lord and Ishvara, very clearly he is referring to the individual aspect of the divine, okay, the personal aspect. The personal aspect can be seen, at the same time the universal aspect can be seen together at the supramental level. And that is available to you as the integral knowledge. When you are below the supermind, you may not have the integral knowledge, you may have touches of it, but not in a very, very definitive manner. I read the second one. It enables us to unite our will with his. Okay, so his is with an H cap, very clearly it's a personal, because if it's impersonal, he can't say will. He can't say will. He can't say his. It would be its. So there he is personal. You see him as a king governing his kingdom. Okay, so it enables us to unite our will with his, to realize his will in the energies of all existences and to perceive the fulfillment of these energies of others as part of our own universal self-fulfillment. All the others also who are working, all those things, they become perfectly compatible with your own will in the physical world. So naturally, it can be much more effective, and it is a divine will that you are identifying yourself with. Okay, if it's the integral knowledge at the supramental level. Thus, it removes the reality of strife and division and opposition and leaves only their appearances. So, although in the physical world, the oppositions and the clashes and the wars, all that will go on, but you are at a consciousness, when you see all these things, he has listed three things: strife, division, and opposition. But they all become mere surface phenomena. They become appearances only. Deep inside, you will see that the divine is working fully conscious and fully purposeful and very, very organized made. Okay, he knows exactly what he's doing. But all the surface phenomena that we see in the physical world become only appearances of no importance. Okay, that's what he's saying. Thus, it removes the reality of strife. No, note in the physical world, the strife and division and opposition are realities. He's using the word reality and he's ending the sentence with appearances. So reality becomes only an appearance. Okay, so by that knowledge, therefore, we arrive at the possibility of a divine action. So divine action is possible when you go to the supreme supramental level. If you are in the spiritual planes of consciousness, a semi-divine action is possible. It's not that it's not possible. After all, Mother, when she was, before she had the supramental, she was able to break the golden door. So it is possible to have a divine action, but it's not complete. Okay? In the supermind, it becomes complete action. Thus, by that knowledge, the integral knowledge, therefore, we arrive at the possibility of a divine action, a working which is personal to our nature but impersonal to our being, since it proceeds from that That's the supermind, which is beyond our ego and acts only by a universal sanction. So those who are looking at you in the physical world will see that you are acting. Your body, mind, life is acting. That's why he's saying personal to our nature. But the source of your action is in the infinite, but impersonal to our being. Since it proceeds from that, that is the origin. Whatever you are doing is not initiated by the mind or the will. Normally, in our case, it is like that. Our mind and will is initiating our action. But now, the mind and will have become absolutely silent and have become passive. And they are now only representing the supreme action of the divine, but it is manifesting itself through you, and the others don't see that. But you realize that. Personal to our nature, but impersonal to our being. Since it proceeds from that which is beyond our ego and acts only by its universal sanction. You are not doing anything, the divine is doing, and whatever he says you do, your body, mind, life is doing. Okay. We proceed in our works with equality. Equality without bondage to works and the results. That's why you are absolutely passive. The body, mind, life becomes passive. Completely surrendered to the divine. With equality, without bondage to works. Whatever work you are doing has no karmic effect on you. The law of karma is suspended for even the body, mind, life. Okay. When you are in the supramental consciousness. Okay. So, this is a truth that is repeated in our Upanishads. Okay, very clearly also, the very first Isha Upanishad says, na karma lipyate nare. Okay, so nare means the soul. Okay, when Isha is talking, the soul is free. There is no more suffering for the soul. But the body, mind, life, because it's at the lower level, will continue to have the effects of karma. But not if you are in the supermental. If you are in the supermental, even the body, mind, life will be free of karma. It will not have any effect on you. In this way, 3 levels. At our level, our soul also will have to undergo the law of karma. When we are at the spiritual level, the soul is free from karma, but the body, mind, life will continue to have the law of karma. Okay, that's the reason why even spiritual giants, okay, Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna, their body had to undergo cancer. Okay, then when you go to the supreme level of what is calling the supermind, even the body, mind, life will be free of karma. So that's what he's saying here. Okay, so we proceed in our works with equality, without bondage to works and their results, in unison with the highest, in unison with the universal, free from the separate responsibility of our acts and therefore unaffected by their reactions. In this sentence, there are 3 levels. We proceed in our works. Our body, mind, life seems to be working. Actually, it is passive. It's only reflecting the divine will with equality, without bondage to works and the results, in unison with the highest. That's the transcendent. So your consciousness is obeying the transcendent, but also the universal, in unison with the universal. So the transcendent and the universal is working through you, but your individuality has become 0. When I say individuality, you have to take it as the ego. The ego consciousness of the body, mind, life is not there. Your body, mind, life is there, but it has become a perfect instrument and obedient to the divine will, free from separate responsibility for our acts and therefore unaffected by their reactions. The karmic law is broken. This which we have seen to be the fulfillment of the path of works becomes thus an annex and a result of the path of knowledge. So if you follow the integral path, both Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga merge and become one and you become free. We read the last 2 paras and we'll finish it. Okay? The integral knowledge again reveals to us. So, one of you has to read.
The integral knowledge again reveals to us the self-existent as the all-blissful, who as Satchidananda manifesting the world, manifesting all beings, accepts their adoration even as he accepts their works of aspiration and their seekings of knowledge, leans down to them and drawing them to himself, takes all into the joy of his divine being. Knowing him as our divine self, we become one with him, as the lover and beloved become one, in the ecstasy of that embrace. Knowing him too in all beings, perceiving the glory and beauty and joy of the beloved everywhere, we transform our souls into a passion of universal delight and a wideness and joy of universal love. All this, which as we shall find is the summit of the path of devotion, becomes also an annex and result of the path of knowledge.
Yeah, it's there. He has told you earlier that Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga merge. Now he is telling you that the Bhakti Yoga also merges with. So you have all the three. Okay? The integral knowledge again reveals to us the self-existent as the all-blissful. The self-existent is the Sat aspect. The all-blissful is the Ananda aspect. Who, as Satchidananda, manifesting the world, manifesting all beings, accepts their adoration, even as he accepts their works of aspiration and their seekings of knowledge. So, accepts their adoration, he answers to your bhakti. Even as he accepts the works of aspiration, he answers to your karma yogic aspiration, if you want. Whatever works you are doing for him, he gives you the result of that. And the seekings of knowledge. Also, Jnana Yoga, when you are going through the mind, he will give you the necessary knowledge also. He opens to you all the three things. Okay. Sat, Chit, Shakti, Anand. Leans down to them and drawing them to himself, takes all into the joy of his divine being. This leans down is interesting. Okay, I remember in one place where Srimad is telling Nirodha, he is asking to be pulled up. He's saying, why don't you help me and pull me up? Okay, then Srimad tells him, I am leaning down. Take hold of my hand, and not exactly the same words, but that's basically the burden of what he's saying. I am pulling down. Take advantage of what I am giving you. Pull yourself up. I am doing all I can to help you. Okay. So leaning down. So the divine doesn't remain up only and starts giving you only theoretical knowledge. He leans down actually. Okay. It's an interesting phrase that Srimad is using. No? Leans down to them and drawing them to himself, takes all into the joy of his divine being. Knowing him as our divine self, he is the same as our soul. We become one with him as the lover and beloved become one in the ecstasy of that embrace. Knowing him too in all beings, not only he is one with us in our being, but he is also one with other beings, and you realize that. Knowing him too in all beings, not ourselves alone. Perceiving the glory and beauty and joy of the beloved everywhere, we transform our souls into a passion of universal delight and a wideness and joy of universal love. You start loving everything and everybody also. So, all this which, as we shall find, is the summit of the path of devotion, becomes also an annex and the result of the path of knowledge. So all the three merge if you follow the integral path. But if you don't follow the integral path, you may have glimpses of this, but it won't be a perfect reality. It won't be absolutely complete. So,
there are three expressions here. One is fulfillment of the path of works.
Yes.
Summit of the path of devotion and annex on the path of knowledge. So does it have any significance?
I'll have to look carefully, but I don't think so. He's using different words because if he had used the same words, sometimes he does use the same words, he goes on repeating. But here is a question of a little bit of literature. If you go on repeating the same words.
No, but also fulfillment is very different from annexures, no? Annex something adjunct.
Yeah, I think you are right. So that's right. Annex is something which is by the side. Yeah, it's like a side house which also belongs to you, like an annex. Yeah, that's right. So I can't. I'm not sure of uh, what it actually corresponds to the experience. I can't say. Okay. So your question is an interesting one. He's saying, yeah, he's saying.
But
Mm,
in the previous para,
ah,
the last sentence says,
ah,
that which we have seen to be the fulfillment of the path of work
that's right.
becomes God's NXE and result of the path of knowledge. So
Yeah.
he has used the word NXE in last para also and this para also.
Yes, and in that one which you are pointing out, Yasmin, this which we have seen to be the fulfillment becomes the annex. So he is
Yes.
not making a very great difference between fulfillment and annex. In other words, you can also interpret the word annex as it gets integrated into you. The neighboring house is not something alien to you, it becomes part of your own property. So you can take the meaning of annex in that sense, because this sentence, what Yasmin pointed out just now, that which you have seen to be the fulfillment of the path of works becomes thus an annex. So the fulfillment also is becoming an annex. In other words, it gets added to you. So I don't think we should make a very logical and very sharp distinction between fulfillment and logic and annex. So as usual, we go on warning ourselves that mental distinctions, you have to be very, very careful. Carrying mental distinctions too far can land you in confusion. We have to be a little more plastic in our way of looking at things, because sharpness should be there. There should be no confusion. And yet at the same time, there should be a little bit of plasticity in our understanding. Because what Gitanjali pointed out, Gita, it is true that annex is not really, it is inferior to your main house. No? That is also true. But here, look at what Srimati is saying, the fulfillment becomes the annex. So, in other words, you have to interpret the word fulfillment, that result of the works, karma yoga, becomes part of you. You can take it in that sense. Okay? So, let's finish the last para, thus by the Imperial Yoga. Archana, you read? Or any one of you?
Yes, Rangada. Yes, no. Yes, Rangada. I was unmuting
Okay.
myself.
Go ahead.
Thus, by the thus by the integral knowledge, we unify all things in the one. We take up all the chords of the universal music, trains, sweet or discordant, luminous in their suggestion or obscure, powerful or faint, heard or suppressed, and find them all changed and reconciled in the indivisible harmony of Sachidanand. The knowledge brings also the power and the joy. How shall he be deluded? When shall he have sorrow who sees everywhere the oneness?
Again, that last also is a quote, and it
Yeah.
is referring to the Isha Upanishad, verse 7.
Tatra ka moha ka lobha ekatvam.
Yeah. Ekatvam anupashyatah, the one who is seeing oneness everywhere. Kaha shoka, kaha moha. How can there be shoka and moha? So that is the finally all the three get completely merged into. Okay, so that finishes the oneness. Now we come to the soul and nature, and we've got plenty of time, so we'll start the chapter. And
Rangada,
yes, tell
1
me.
minute.
Yeah, tell me.
Rangada, what's the meaning of deluded exact? Doesn't it come from delusion?
Yeah, moha. If you want the Hindi word or the Sanskrit word, moha. Delusion means confusion in the mind and ignorance. Delusion, correct. To delude somebody is to misguide him, to give him wrong ideas. How shall he be deluded? How can he have moha? Huh? So that's right. When shall he have sorrow who sees everywhere the oneness? In fact, the Sanskrit word just now, as Gitanjali said, shoka and moha. Shoka is sorrow and moha is delusion. You can't be deluded because you are seeing oneness. There is nothing to confuse you. Confusion comes when there are two things or three things. But there is only one thing. How can you be deluded? You can't have any confusion in the mind. Okay? So,
Yes.
so we'll do one thing. We can start soul and nature, and I will maybe tomorrow I have a chart, the nature and soul theories. Okay, so I'll make this chart and put it up on the on our website. The Skype. I'll try and put it there. I don't know if I can do it, but I'll try to do it. And you will see that there are many theories about the soul and nature. There are non-spiritual theories and there are spiritual theories. So it's a very interesting discussion, and we'll see that it will become clear to you. Spiritual theories and non-spiritual theories of the soul and nature. What's their relationship? What is their reality? What will they become? So that's it. I'll try and do that for the next time because we have 1 week. I should be able to do it. I've done it in my notebook, in my book, but I'll put it on the, I'll try and put it on the net. Okay, so shall we start reading soul and nature? Okay, before we start, okay, you can use many words for soul and nature. One, you can say, soul is the essential part of you, okay, the divine element in you. And your nature is that which the universe is providing you instruments for the soul to work with in the physical world. It provides you a body, it provides you a vital energy, and it also provides you a mind to think out. Okay, it's very similar to any instrument in the physical world. Let's take a car. Okay, so the car, the steel body is your body. Okay, then it has to move. And how can it move? It has to be given fuel and an engine. That's your vital. Okay, but if there is no driver, it has to guide itself, and that would be the computer. That's your brain. So the brain uses the energy of the engine to drive the car. In fact, this has become a reality now. Na? In fact, I don't know if you know, but cars can nowadays, driverless cars are possible. If it is computerized, they can actually park themselves correctly. Even if there are two vehicles which are very close, a driverless car will park itself perfectly because it is guided by a computer and it senses obstructions and it goes in. So this is what the universe is giving you. The universe is giving you a body, a vital and a mind, and that is your nature. Okay? You can use different words, but that's it. So there is an essential being, the driver, but if the driver is not there, still the body, mind, life can move by itself like a car, driverless car. It's a very interesting comparison. Okay, you can have a driver for a car. Okay? That's your soul, but the car can move without a driver, and that's what happens when your soul goes out into the self. The car, which is now the body, mind, life, can move itself. Who is moving it? Universal nature. So the soul and nature is one way of putting. You can also use the words immutable and mutable. The immutable is the soul, the mutable is your nature. Or you can use the word Purusha and Prakriti. Okay? Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is your soul, Prakriti is your body, mind, life. You can also use the word self and Maya. The self is the essential part of you, and the Maya, which is the construction. Okay? That is your body, mind, life. Or you can also use the words in a very, very general way, Ishvara and Shakti. The body, mind, life is the Shakti. Okay? Or you can also use the word conscious being and conscious force. And finally, you can also have Lord and his force. So this is the basic Purusha and Prakriti. A small discussion to again clarify the idea of Purusha and Prakriti, soul and nature. If you compare, we'll take two things. We can take the sun first. If the sun is the Purusha, Prakriti is its power to give heat and light. It's its nature. Okay, that's one way of understanding. Now, if you can think of the flower, okay, the flower is the Purusha. The fragrance, the color, the form is the Prakriti. That's the outermost part of it. Now we come to the human being. The human being, Purusha is the soul or self. And the body, mind, life, which is the constructed part and temporary, that's your Prakriti. Okay? So, now we can start reading. The first one is about a page. So we shall start reading. We've got plenty of time today. We've got 15, 20 minutes. We can definitely do the first paragraph. Okay? So, who has not read today? Sunki has not read and Jyoti Anand also has not read. So, any one of you read, yeah.
Yeah, shall I read?
Yes, please do. This is the result.
This is the result of the integral knowledge taken in its mass. Its work is to gather up the different strands of our being into the universal oneness. If we are to possess perfectly the word in our new divinized consciousness, as the divine himself possesses it, we have to know also each thing in its absoluteness, first by itself, secondly in its union with all that completes it. For so has the divine imaged out and seen its being in the world. To see things as parts, as incomplete elements, is a lower analytic knowledge. The absolute is everywhere. It has to be seen and found everywhere. Every finite is an infinite and has to be known and sensed in its intrinsic infiniteness as well as in its surface finite appearance. But so to know the word, so to perceive and experience it, it is not enough to have an intellectual idea or imagination that so it is. A certain divine vision, divine sense, divine ecstasy is needed, an experience of a union of ourselves with the objects of our consciousness. In that experience, not only the beyond, but also here, not only the totality, the all in its mass, but each thing in the all becomes to us ourself, God, the absolute and infinite Satchidananda. This is the secret of a complete delight in God's word, complete satisfaction of the mind and heart and will, complete liberation of the consciousness. It is the supreme experience at which art and poetry and all the various efforts of subjective and objective knowledge and all desire and effort to possess and enjoy objects are trying more or less obscurely to arrive. Their attempts to seize the forms and properties and qualities of things is only a first movement which cannot give the deepest satisfaction unless by seizing them perfectly and absolutely they get the sense of the infinite reality of which these are the outer symbols. To the rational mind and the ordinary sense experience, this may well seem only a poetic fancy or a mystic hallucination. But the absolute satisfaction and sense of illumination which it gives and alone can give is really a proof of its greater validity. We get by that away from the higher consciousness and the diviner sense into which our subjective being is intended eventually, if we will only allow it to be transfigured.
Yeah. Interesting para as usual, sir, because language is very tense and very condensed. So we'll have to look what he's saying. Now, he's talking of both, the higher knowledge and the lower knowledge. I'm reading the last sentence, okay? To the rational mind, and the ordinary sense experience, this may well seem only a poetic fancy or a mystic hallucination. It reminds me of what he says in one of his poems, because when he's discussing his poem, Thought the Paraclete and other poems, he's in Savitri also. He's describing the light and the color and all that. So when someone asks him, this light and color that you are talking about, is it your imagination? Is it a poetic image? Or is it what is it? So Sridhar says, no, not at all. That is what I have seen. It's the real color of that area. That is what I'm seeing. Whatever I've seen only I am putting down. I'm not imagining anything. Okay. So that's what he's saying here. To the rational mind and the ordinary sense experience, this may well seem to be a poetic fancy or a mystic hallucination. You may feel that God is your own imagination and all the experiences you are having is psychological and has no essential truth. But he's saying absolutely not. That's not the fact. But the absolute satisfaction and sense of illumination which it gives and alone can give is really a proof of its greater validity. The validity will be proved when you experience it, and you will see how superior it is to the sense knowledge. The sense knowledge is nothing compared to the spiritual knowledge. We get by that a ray from the higher consciousness and the diviner sense into which our subjective being is intended eventually, if we will only allow it to be transfigured. This, if we will only allow it, is very interesting, because he says elsewhere also, if only man was willing to be spiritualized, because he is not willing. There are dark elements in him and he is not willing to be spiritualized. I remind you of that one lady who came and told me that she had the experience of golden light coming into her head. But there was something in her which did not want it. It is rejecting it. She was very categorical, that is rejecting. But it may not take the form of rejection, but it may take the form of fear. Okay, it may take also. That also is a form of rejection only. I am too small and this is too big for me, I can't accept it. It's like a huge storm which is entering your house. You close the doors. It's too much for me. Okay, so that's what he's saying. But he's also using a very interesting word. He's saying diviner sense. Now, why is he saying diviner sense? Because even our normal senses also are essentially divine. That's why. The higher is a diviner sense. It is much more divine than the lower sense. Okay? The limitation becomes less, into which our subjective being is intended eventually, if we will only allow it to be transformed. So, I now go back to the beginning of and we'll see what he's saying, because the words are very important. I stress on the words again and again, I tell you, because next time when you see the word, now you know exactly what he's saying. Okay. Yesterday in the Life Divine class, we had one session and none of the students could actually say it. He says the three aspects of essential being. Okay. So I asked them, what is the essential being and what are the three aspects? They all got stumped. Okay. Now the essential being, one boy said, it's body, mind, life. Then I asked him, your body, mind, life is essential? And then they realized, okay, essential is the soul, the real, most important. So it's not this body, mind, life at all. So the three elements of the essential soul are Satchidananda. So that's why I'm saying we have to understand the words and what is meaning with the word. The word only represents the meaning of the, so we have to pay attention to the words. So I start reading the sentences. This is the result of the integral knowledge taken in its mass, because it includes also Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Its work is to gather up the different strands of our being into its universal oneness. The different strands of our being are not only the body, mind, life. Okay? Strand is a thread. So we have so many threads in our body, mind, life are the main threads in the lower world, but there is also the inner mind, inner vital, inner physical. Okay. Then there is the intraconscient, there is the subconscient, there is the superconscient, there is also a circumconscient around you. Even your aura is part of you. You have an individual aura. So that all these are the different strands of our being into the universal oneness. You have to lose your limited form, and that's the ego. When you lose your limited form, you become the infinite. Just like the grain of salt and the salt in the sea. The salt in the sea has lost its form, color, features, but it is there everywhere. So that's a universal oneness. I read the next sentence. If we are to possess perfectly the world in our new divinized consciousness, as the divine himself possesses it, we have to know also each thing in its absoluteness. First, by itself. Secondly, in its union with all that completes it. For so has the divine imaged out and seen its being in the world. Now, very interesting sentence, and we'll look at each thing carefully. If we are to possess, the word possess means to be absolutely in command and have power over something. You can, when you are in possession of something, you can do whatever you want with it. Okay. So, if we are to possess perfectly the world, in other words, you have full power over the world. You can do what you want with the world.
Rangada, again
Yes.
this is from Isha that Ma Gridha Kasyas with Dhanam. Like possessing the world, not as Anisha but as Isha.
Yeah. That's right. So perfectly the world in our new divinized consciousness, as the divine himself possesses it. The divine is in full control of the physical world. We have to know also each thing in its absoluteness. When you want to have full power over something, you must know its nature. Okay? Just as they say that if you want to conquer your enemy, you must know the nature of the enemy. If you don't know the nature of the enemy, how will you conquer it? So the physical world also you must know. That's what Sridhar is saying. Okay? First of all, by itself. By itself means the transcendent. You must know yourself. Secondly, in its union with all that completes it. That's a universal. So first, the divine must know himself, and that he knows. Secondly, he must also know what is in the universe. And that is exactly what Sridhar wants. He wants you to, the individual must lose his limited features, become the transcendent, and also become the universal. For so has the image divine imaged out and seen its being in the world. Now that's interesting. The word image indicates to you that there is a correspondence between the world and the reality. But also it gives you the idea that the world is a secondary importance. The image of something gives you knowledge of the thing being imaged, but it is still an image. So there is a secondary reality to it. Okay? The word image gives you that. In fact, he is using the word which the Mayavadins use. The world is only an image. Okay? Out and seen is being in the world. To see things as parts. When do we see things as parts? When we are in ignorance. At our level, we are seeing everything as parts. We are seeing everything separately. As incomplete elements is a lower analytical knowledge. Now that's interesting. He's saying that even when you see parts, it's a lower analytical knowledge. This is science. Science is looking at everything, all objects, and thinking them to be separate. But it's a knowledge. The knowledge is using analysis, not synthesis. Spiritual knowledge is synthetic knowledge. Scientific knowledge is analytical knowledge. It analyzes and sees as separateness. Not anymore, actually. Even scientists are also beginning to see the reality. There is a very interesting video of a scientist who is having spiritual experiences. I think I have most of your emails I have. So I'll send this video to you. It's about 40 minutes or so. How the scientist And he is not the only one. There are many scientists who are realizing and having spiritual experiences. And they have come to the conclusion that consciousness is the main thing. So I'll send it to you. Okay. I'll remember and try and send it to you. You can watch it. It's very interesting. It's about 40 minutes video. A scientist, he's an Italian. He has made some interesting discoveries also. I forget his name now. But he's talking about consciousness and the spiritual experiences that he had. Okay. The world is really changing very fast. After the supramental has descended, even the Pakka materialists are beginning to change. So, analytical knowledge. The absolute is everywhere. Okay? The absolute is everywhere, even in the relative. It has to be seen and found everywhere. Every finite is an infinite and has to be known and sensed in its intrinsic infiniteness as well as in its surface finite appearance. This sentence is very interesting. Every finite is an infinite, but the infinite is hiding in the finite and has to be known and sensed in its intrinsic infiniteness. I remind you again of the very beautiful lines from William Blake. Okay, I am reading them out to you. I have them written on top. To see a world in a grain of sand. Every grain of sand contains the whole world. And heaven in a wild flower. Something very insignificant in a wild flower, and you can see heaven in it. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Okay. William Blake, he was a painter and also a mystic, and he was also a poet. 14 something or 15 something in England. So that's what is being revealed here. Every finite is an infinite and has to be known and sensed in its intrinsic infiniteness as well as in its surface finite appearance. You must know both. Science is seeing only the surface finite appearance, but the yogi is seeing the infinite in the finite and has to be known and sensed in its intrinsic infiniteness as well as its surface finite appearance. But so to know the world, now this is another interesting word. Sri Aurobindo uses the word so in this sense, like this. Okay? But so to know the world. The word so can be interpreted in different ways, but Sri Aurobindo's use of the word so is like this, in this manner. Okay? But so to know the world, so to perceive and experience it, it is not enough to have an intellectual idea or imagination that so it is. 3 times he has used the word so in this sense, that like this. A certain divine action, divine sense, divine ecstasy is needed. An experience of union of ourselves with the objects of our consciousness. We have to see ourselves in everything. In that experience, not only the beyond, but all here. Not only the totality, the all in its mass, but each thing in the all becomes to us our own self, God, the absolute and infinite, Satchidananda. In every stone, in every animal, in everything, every atom, you will see the divine is there. If you have that experience, you are the most fortunate person, okay, because you see the reality. This is the secret of complete delight in God's word. Okay? Complete satisfaction of the mind, heart and will, complete liberation of the consciousness. Now, Sri is talking of satisfaction of mind, heart and will. The ascetics are not doing that. They don't want satisfaction of mind, heart and will. They are rejecting it. They want only the essential thing. They don't want the entirety. Okay? But Sri is saying, no, you must have complete satisfaction. So, briefly, what would be the satisfaction of the mind? Total knowledge. The mind wants knowledge always, so it would have total knowledge. Then, what about the satisfaction of the vital? It wants enjoyment, mainly. So, it has got the right to Ananda, and it has to get that satisfaction. What about the body? The body is at present subject to death, incapacity, and all sorts of diseases. So it has to be free of that. The satisfaction of the body would be a totally healthy body without the necessity of food and sleep, and also death. Death would be optional. It should not be imposed on you. So that's the complete delight in God's work. It is the supreme experience at which art and poetry and all the various efforts of subjective and objective knowledge. Subjective knowledge, yoga. Objective knowledge, science. And all desire and effort to possess and enjoy objects are trying more or less obscurely to arrive. He's saying that every activity of the physical world, whatever it be, all the 64 shastras of the Indian in Indian culture, we have 64 shastras. Everything is there. For dancing, for music, for science, for astronomy, for surgery, everything was there. It is complete. It is a supreme experience in which art and poetry and all the various efforts of subjective and objective knowledge and all desire and effort to possess and enjoy objects are trying more or less obscurely to arrive. Their attempt to seize the forms and properties and qualities of things is only a first movement. He's talking about science. Science is trying to seize the forms and properties and qualities of things, which is only the first movement, which cannot give the deepest satisfaction unless by seizing them perfectly and absolutely they get the sense of the infinite reality of which they are only outer symbols. Everything in the physical world, all the forms are outward symbols. Behind the outward symbol is the reality lurking behind the appearance. To the rational mind and the ordinary sense experience, this may well seem to be a poetic fancy or a mystic hallucination. It is not. It is more concrete. The subtle is more concrete than the gross. Okay, that's what he's saying. And we have discussed that last sentence. So we stop here. We have come to the end of our session, 8:36. Okay, so we'll make a note. Next time we have to read synthesis.